Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for doing this.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for taking my job.
Hey, I think you've kept your job, actually.
I know, I'm still
fill
here.
your shoes.
Right? Next year I'll be the baker in residence. I'm a big fan of baked goods.
You got baked goods there.
So I've got something for you, my friend.
Is it COVID secure?
I think it is, but I need to put my mask on before I give it to you. So, for you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so.
What's in here?
This is probably our 5th or 6th innovative conversation.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes I make food for our guests.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's a little, what is that called?
Is it a bun?
It's a bun.
It's a bun.
It's a bun. It's got raisins or something. Yeah, it's good. It's a bun.
It's got chocolate chips in it.
But yeah, I think, it'll get your energy going because this is going to be a high energy conversation.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
So if things get challenging, I bite into the bun.
There you go.
Hopefully that will help me through it.
And there's some water down here for you to wash it down.
Thank you very much.
So you're good to go.
That's very kind. Did you make this with Gail?
Yes.
You did.
We made it together, actually.
That was very generous of them.
So look, is the beard. It's beautiful.
Thank you very much. It just keeps on giving. It won't stop.
How long have you had the beard?
Do you know what? I had a bit of a beard crisis back in January and it all came off because it was just getting on my nerves a little bit and it's all just come back again in that time, yeah.
I see. Welcome as the official innovator in residence for 2020-2021. This is the passing of the torch or the passing of the bun, as it were. What we're gonna do is, I figure we're gonna do the power of 10 today.
Okay, right.
I'm gonna ask you 10 questions. I don't know if we're gonna get through them all, because we know you all have questions for Daniel Raven Ellison, which by the way, is either an actor's name or like a Nobel Prize winner's name.
That's very generous. It's actually a merger in equity between my wife and I because we didn't feel that either of us should lose our last names. So I won because her name was Raven, and that's like a far cooler name than Ellison. So
there you go.
Really going on there.
Well, you know, you got a very literary thing happening here. Raven, Edgar Allan Poe, Ellison, Ralph Ellison, the Invisible Man, Daniel. Who's Daniel? Who do we have for Daniel? Daniel Defoe? All right, great.
Here we go, strong.
Yes, so we're gonna interact with our audience. We have, and look, you all, which camera am I looking to, Joe? Like, where am I looking? Right here. All right, so you all will be able to ask your questions as well. I got the laptop here. When you ask questions, it'll go here. At some point during the program, I'll go here and ask you some of their questions. But let's get started like this before we get into the questions. We start how we always start with a poem. I want you to listen to this and just tell me your reaction, your thoughts.
Okay.
It's called Earth Song by Langston Hughes. It's an Earth song, and I've been waiting long for an Earth song. It's a spring song, and I've been waiting long for a spring song, strong as the bursting of young buds, strong as the shoots of a new plant, strong as the coming of this first child from its mother's womb. An earth song, a body song, a spring song, and I've been waiting long for an earth song. What do you think?
What do I think? I don't know, it's very powerful, isn't it? Very powerful. And actually, to be honest, it makes me feel a bit sad, to be honest. That's where it takes me to. You know, because, I mean, everyone knows this, right? But in terms of an earth song and tuning into the earth right now, I mean, the earth is crying out, isn't it? The earth is crying out, and the people on the planet are also crying out because just so much is going on right now. And these things are kind of like symptomatic of that, aren't they? They're like the end point of the results of everything that has happened leading up to this crisis we find ourselves in terms of this health crisis. But for the species that share this earth alongside us, You know, for just too many of them, for too many of those species, it's too late. But then it also makes me feel hopeful in the sense of that song. If we can hear that song, if I'm interpreting this correctly, there's so much we can turn around, and there's so much evidence to show that within 10 years, we could actually be in a position where nature isn't declining, but nature is restoring, the earth is restoring. But that will only happen if we hear what's happening at the moment and react to it. I'd love to read it separately, but that's my initial reaction.
That's beautiful. It's called Earth Song by Langston Hughes.
What do you take from it?
What do I take from it?
Yeah, what do you take from it?
Langston Hughes was a race poet. Langston Hughes was a poet of the people. Langston Hughes was a poet from Harlem. Langston Hughes was a poet during the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes was a poet that came of age right after Reconstruction, which happened right after slavery. In my sort of feeling, I think you're spot on, first of all. I think we're looking at the earth and what's happening to it and wanting to hear that there's beauty and hope through this song. But I think the earth is also a metaphor for the Black body. And I think just like the earth is being decimated and destroyed, Langston Hughes grew up during a time where a lot of Black men were being lynched. And so it's the earth literal and the earth is metaphor. And I think we got to take care of the literal and we got to take care of all of it.
Right.
It's all, Langston Hughes used to say, everything's connected. It's all connected up. I got 10 questions. It's the power of 10.
I mean, the connection there, whether we're talking about whoever we're talking about,
right,
is respect for other, ultimately,
Absolutely.
regardless of where they're from, regardless of not just their geography or their race,
right,
but I go as far as saying their species as well. And you know, a concept that people don't talk about enough, and it's a very challenging concept to deal with, is the idea of speciesism. You know, this idea that we actually have preferences for some species over other species, and that in its own right is highly problematic when you begin to deconstruct what that means. So yeah.
Give me an example of speciesism.
Like, what's your favorite dog? Like, what's your favorite breed of dog?
My daughter's watching this, which is really unfortunate because she wants a dog, and I can't really say this on camera.
You can just, it's just like,
all right, you know, all right, cool.
You don't have to, your favorite dog doesn't have to be the same as your daughter's choice of dog.
I'll just say a Doberman Pinscher.
Doberman, good
choice. Can I say that?
So what's like, I love golden retrievers, right? They're kind of like awesome, gorgeous dogs. Okay. But what's a Doberman got over a retriever, right? Or what's a retriever got over a kingfisher or a chicken? And what's a chicken got over a rhino? And why is it that we work so hard to want to save some charismatic species, but other species which we think are like maybe a little bit less intelligent or not quite so beautiful, that they're not as valuable maybe? Why is it that we spend so much money trying to look after eagles and yet eat chickens in their billions? Whereas like chickens kind of want to live and seagulls want to live, but we kind of get down on those animals. But the ones that really are struggling, you know, we maybe invest in more. So I think the notion of speciesism, when we think about other life on the planet, is an interesting way to start thinking about how we treat other people and other species. Wow. But it's a really challenging concept to get your head around.
It's deep. It seems like the root of it, though, it all stems from the same place, or we have to be better human beings. We have to be kinder.
Right.
Right? And so if we are, then that will reflect in how we treat everything and everyone.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
This is good. This is good.
It's a nice light start.
I feel
after the bun.
You know what that means?
Yeah.
You gotta take a bite.
What's in the bag?
No, you gotta take a bite.
I've got to take a bite.
Yeah, we gotta make it lighter.
So I'm going to ask you now, this is going to be revealing about me. So has this got animal products in it?
You might not want to eat that.
I might not eat that.
You might not want to eat it. No, it's a good point.
It's completely possible to make a delicious bun like this without using animal products.
I'm not sure Gales is necessarily concerned with no animal products.
Well, you can ask her when you get home.
I am.
And
I am. And then I'll email you.
thank you, though.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I got 10 questions for you.
Great.
After I finish chewing.
Haven't we had a question yet?
That didn't count. It didn't count. Pick a number, because we're not going to get through all 10 of these. So pick a number.
10.
From 10. Wow. Daniel, you got the chance to work with Nat Geo.
So did you, I see.
We both had that in common.
Yep.
And you walked across London's national parks, all while wearing an EEG to track your emotions. What was the most surprising emotion for you during your travel?
That's a great question. So the project was to walk across all the national parks and all the cities in the UK. It was a 1,600 kilometer walk. And on my head, I had this claw-like device with these sensors on it that was able to measure my emotions, right? So this is kind of pseudoscience, really, because anyone knows anything about EEGs will know that if you're walking around the landscape like that, you're not getting a great reading. But I got enough out of like the billions of data points I collected to tell me about my levels of excitement, stress, relaxation, all kinds of different things. And essentially, what this project found was that when I was in deciduous woodland, particularly deciduous woodland in cities, that's when I was personally most excited and most relaxed, like phenomenally more than going through any other type of land, whether it was thinking about a moorland or urban areas or industrial areas or grassland, whatever. Deciduous woodland, far more than coniferous woodland as well. So deciduous woodland being, you know, the trees where the leaves fall off, just in case anyone's not sure about that. Whereas the coniferous, the Christmas tree woodland, didn't have the same effect. And I think it was a mixture of dappled light, curvature of branches, the visual complexity of being immersed within that kind of woodland, sound of birds, the different leaves, these kinds of things having a big impact on my brain and my well-being. And, you know, the evidence actually shows that it's not just my experience.
Right.
The same thing is modeled when, you know, hundreds of people are involved doing similar pieces of research. And also, actually, I didn't need to have the device in my head because I just knew that's how I felt anyway. And people have been practicing the art of like forest bathing in Japan for like thousands of years or something. So I didn't.
Forest bathing.
Forest bathing, yeah, the idea that you go and bathe in the forest, which makes sense. It's what you're doing for, right? You go and bathe in the forest and just enjoy being there, yeah, being immersed. But one of the things I discovered from that particular project, a couple of things. First thing really is that that many people think that to have an experience with nature, you need to go out there to a wilderness or to a big like landscape.
Right.
But I'm a geographer and I'm very interested in scale and connections to things. And when you think about an oak tree, if you're between the ages of 0 and 3, which are the ages when your brain is developing most quickly neurologically, the most formative parts of time of your life, really, a single oak tree will give you as much dappled light and color and experience as the biggest forest you can give an adult. And while our London plane trees we have here will only support 1 or 2 species, on an oak tree you could have up to 500 species within a single oak tree in this country. So actually the oak trees that we have and other trees we have in our cities are really important, not just for nature, not just for cleaning the air, but they're really important for the mental health and well-being of our youngest people, but also clearly us too.
So I can't even imagine like what the EEG would register on my walking habits, because like I told you before we sat down, when I came to London a year ago, I was all about car service and Uber, and like I was being driven or taking the underground.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, the anxiety and just the care and the safety, I was like, I'm not getting in anybody's anything. I walked everywhere and I maintain that. Like to this day, I will not ride. I will walk everywhere.
So where have you walked from and to?
So the furthest place I walked, y'all might be laughing. Don't laugh at me. The furthest place I walked is from here to Brixton.
Okay, great. How long did that take you? Like an hour or so?
50.
Nice.
That's the first.
That's an iconic walk.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I walked I walk from here to Hyde Park. I do that a lot. I love that walk and back.
Yeah.
So, but here's my question. And I love it. That's my thing now. I'm walking everywhere. I'm getting fit. I'm loving it. If the EEG was on my head, it would register inspiration through the roof. I got to tell you, Daniel, I need you to explain to me geographically, scientifically, philosophically, why inspiration hits me like nobody's business when I'm walking. I got ideas for stories, for characters, for books, things I would have never thought of. Why is that happening on my walks?
I don't know you well enough to explain that to you. Maybe over a number of sessions, we could finally get there.
Just like counseling. What are we doing here?
No, I completely agree with you. And actually, the place where I experience that most is walking down canals, where I'll have, assuming there's no cyclists around or anything like that, where I live in West London, I can walk for a very long time, see no one, walk down a canal. And the very fact that I can take that route with no navigation means my brain can switch off to the issue of navigation, and I can go into almost meditative space.
That's what it is.
Where not only do I access other ideas, but crucially, and this is absolutely crucial, I get bored. Like my wife gets nervous basically when I wash up or have a shower or do anything where basically I'm not working on other things, because it's in those sort of slightly bored moments when I'll often have those biggest ideas. And essentially walks are an opportunity to access that space, but also to be very comfortable with that as well.
Wow. Beautiful.
But, having this headset on, there's this idea called psychogeography before. Have you heard of psychogeography?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Is it something to do with Jack Nicholson?
It almost certainly has got something to do with that.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
So psychogeography is the psychology of how you feel about places, how places make you feel, and then psychogeographers, who are practitioners within that sort of space, will think about intentional things that they can do to make themselves feel differently about that place or make that place feel differently about them. And essentially what I'm talking about is adult playtime, right? It's like deep play in terms of accessing a space where you can think differently about the world around you. And these kind of things could be simple things, right? So a simple thing could be that you are afraid of walking down a dark alleyway at night. You educate yourself about the actual risks, and suddenly you don't feel worried about going down that alleyway anymore. There's like a cognitive behavioral programming into that. But more playful things might be, for example, to go on an adventure where you roll a dice and that decides where you're going to go, and you have no idea what you're going to discover, but you let the dice decide where you're going to go. That's psychogeography. But what I found with this project to walk across all the national parks and all the cities wearing this device on my head was that actually the data didn't matter. My quantitative experience didn't matter. What was really interesting was, a bit like when you're wearing a Fitbit. Have you got a Fitbit, or do you count your steps at all? Ever?
I do count my steps.
Okay, so when you count your steps, you kind of tune in a bit more, don't you, to like your relationship between your body and the environment you're in,
right.
How far you've gone, what you've achieved.
Right.
And when you've got a thing on your head, and that thing is thinking how excited or relaxed or stressed, like how do you feel in different places, you begin to second guess your feelings as you go through places, which weirdly, for me, made me sort of tune in far more like a radar into the things I was most interested in. So over this 1,600 kilometer walk on my own, getting very bored,
right.
Not only did I chat to lots of sheep and have conversations with like basically anything alive that I could have a conversation with, but I got really excited in the end by rust. Again, the visual complexity and the beauty of rust in the landscape. Mm-hmm. Moss, absolutely love moss. And then a really weird thing as well, I started to get really excited about roundabouts, which might sound really ridiculously dull, but after you've seen several thousand roundabouts, there was a roundabout I saw in Morecambe up in the northwest of England that had a cormorant statue on this roundabout looking at the landscape. And it just made me think, why doesn't every roundabout have great art on it? And actually even think, what if like every roundabout had bad art on it? I'd rather be offended by large amounts of bad art than have like an absence of anything for it to be sterile. Right. So I became very tuned in to liking things that other people may be disgusted by, because quite often there's a beauty in that when you have enough time to sit with it and you're thinking about what your emotions are. So in many ways, the device was like,
got it.
The data didn't matter. I only knew this stuff.
Where were you born?
I was born in Aldershot.
Aldershot.
It's a military town in Hampshire.
In Hampshire?
Yeah.
I was just in Hampshire this weekend.
Lucky you. Where in Hampshire were you?
Where was I in Hampshire? It sounds kind of, I was at the Four Seasons. All right, yeah.
Well,
but anyway, but that's not my point. My point is I was in Hampshire and we went to the Jane Austen house.
Nice.
And then we went to, we went to Jane Austen house and did some things around there. But I love that area.
I grew up a lot in Hampshire, and it's really interesting how even, places that seem familiar when you get walking,
right?
You just discover stuff that you didn't know was there otherwise. And on that particular project, I actually walked across the South Downs National Park, and literally just a few kilometers south of where I grew up, there's an area that for anyone listening to this, I highly recommend going exploring this part of the country, especially in the spring and summer. There's an area called the Hangers. And the Hangers is in the western part of the South Downs National Park. You've got these sort of steep escarpments. And on the side of these sort of steep hills, you've got these sort of deep ancient forests where there's still some like wild boars like hanging out and that kind of stuff. But then the most beautiful English farmed landscape and amazing villages and things. Anyway, if you've not got into England yet, outside of London, I'd go and walk past the Hangers. Really, really gorgeous. Yeah.
Pick a number.
9.
I feel like there's a pattern here. One of your more recent projects is called Slow Wave. It's a walking map that connects London and other small villages together.
London and other small villages. My gosh.
What inspired you to start this project, and how have you developed it during COVID?
Yeah, so in my sort of walking around the place, I just got thinking a bit more about the UK's footpaths. I mean, like, we're very lucky in the UK that we have about 200,000 kilometres of public rights of way. And actually, if you go up to Scotland, the challenge there is you have access to everything as long as you're polite. And the problem there is that the footpaths aren't clear, but you can walk over fences and things if you want to. You can go anywhere you want as long as you're respectful of the environment you're in. But when thinking about looking at mapping of our footpath network in this country, the way I kind of think of it now is it's almost like a big pile of spaghetti on a plate. So it's like we've got these routes, but you kind of need to have a qualification to make sense of how you would navigate through it. Unlike our road network, where actually, you don't have to have a qualification to get in a car and drive from London to Glasgow. You can just follow the signs, right? So I got thinking about this and got thinking about some of the geometric triangular pattern shapes that you see within like old explorer maps when people used to explore the oceans and that kind of thing, looking for nearest places for them to be able to get to. And got thinking about this principle that given what's going on with the climate crisis, the ecological crisis, the health crisis, and people needing to go to walk rather than drive or use public transport, really everyone should be able to walk to a neighbouring settlement easily, comfortably, directly, enjoyably. Everyone should be able to do that. And if you can't walk to a neighbouring settlement safely, off-road, enjoyably, easily, directly, then something's wrong. Yeah, that should be possible. And then it should be possible, if you're then going to make those connections, to not just walk to a neighbouring settlement, but if you want to go on a long distance journey, to combine multiple routes to make longer distance journeys. And of course, when we think about footpaths around the world, and thinking particularly about the UK at the moment, that's why the footpaths are there. They're because people needed to trade or see family and friends, and they would walk to a neighbouring settlement. And that's why we've kept our footpaths and kept them open. And then some people might want to walk further and go on a pilgrimage or go and do some further distant trading and combine up lots of these routes to go much longer distances. But crucially, historically, what those routes would do is stop and finish in a town or city, a populated place where most people live, work, sleep, see friends, whatever. And we've kind of forgotten that, I think, with our recreational walking in this country, where people will drive out to the countryside and walk to another part of the countryside, possibly back to where they started, and do everything they can to avoid those urban places. But what that does is it not only distorts our geographic imagination of how we can get around the country, but it also makes it more exclusive because it means the only places to stay are like expensive pubs that are hard to book. But if the walks start and finish at train stations and bus stations in towns and cities, where you can eat in Tesco or a 5-star restaurant, you can sleep in an Airbnb or a youth hostel, it opens up opportunities for the future by remembering the history of these routes. So I got thinking about what it would look like to have a network that connected up all the neighbouring settlements. Held a hack day at the beginning of the year, very successful. Was then going to organise 10 hack days around the country to complete this project, but then COVID hit. But actually, although it was very stressful for everyone involved, it was a bit of a blessing in disguise in some ways, because COVID became a catalyst to the project, because suddenly there were thousands of people who love walking, who love maps, who were on Zoom, who were trapped indoors, who wanted to fantasize about the journeys they could be going on. And so we put out a call, 700 people came forward. Those 700 people did a year's worth of volunteering in 1 month.
Wow.
And collectively created 7,500 routes that connect 2,500 towns and cities. And end to end, those routes stretch for 100,000 kilometers, which is the equivalent of 2.5 laps of the equator, which is a pretty awesome, I would say citizen geography project, but I don't like the idea of citizen science, because there's plenty of people in our countries who are non-citizens who can also partake in these scientific and other community projects. Anyway, so really big project. And the next challenge now, and hopefully it'll be on the news tomorrow on the BBC, is to try and find 10,000 people to go and ground truth and test and walk those routes is the next challenge, to make sure they all work. And then the ambition is over time to use ecological principles to allow the best routes in the future to emerge and the less good routes to die away, so that over a number of years we end up with a really strong, robust network that, you know, might just work for Britain, but I think it's very interesting in the context of North America and especially the United States, where people were, yes, using footpaths, but we were also looking at desire lines in terms of what we would like rather than just what's currently possible. I think that idea, ideologically, philosophically, motivationally, is really important, because in terms of our own personal lives, as well as the bigger problems at play at the moment, we have to have desire lines, and we have to try and follow those desire lines to get to wherever it is we're trying to achieve. So in the US, where you're not as, you know, as well blessed, I guess, with having inherited such a rich seam and network of footpaths in the past, that doesn't mean they shouldn't be there for the future. So there's an interesting question about how you then achieve those so that people can walk to go and get themselves some milk or some crisps or see a friend in the next settlement over.
It seems like footpaths and slow ways and being able to walk like you described is a way to keep us connected. Wherever we are, whoever we are, it's just another way to keep us connected. I find that in the States, that's not necessarily what we want. We don't want to be that connected. We try to create these boundaries.
That's not true. That's not true at all. It's just that there are some people who think that they find their connection by controlling things in ways that make them feel comfortable that excludes others. But that doesn't mean that the majority of people seek their security from that same kind of connection. Most of us seek connection from the touch and words and experiences of others, I think. I don't think that it's normal necessarily for people not having access to the land is not the connection that most people want. Most people want the connection to the land and to each other in that place.
I find that to be
challenge me, go on.
A beautiful thing that you just said. I also think that people many times don't know what they want, don't even know that they want it. But I think, yeah, they crave it, they need it, but maybe, just maybe, they don't know that they need it.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because when you pose that challenge, so I was thinking of it from the provider side rather than the consumer side. So for the consumer side, I think that there is a hunger, or at least people can be turned on to that hunger and be made aware of it. I was coming at it more from the provider side, that the obstacle in the US, I think, to more people walking and making those kinds of journeys isn't necessarily that there aren't lots of people who would like to make those journeys, is the point I was really making.
Got it.
It's more that there are other people who want to prevent those kinds of journeys.
Well said.
That's more where I was coming from.
Well said. Yeah. At what age did you say, or what moment, or what thing was it where you said, I'm going to be a geographer, I'm going to be a walker, I'm going to be a lover of the land, of nature, I'm going to be out here changing the world one insect at a time? Like, when did that happen for you?
So I think that we're all, this is going to sound a bit annoying maybe, I think that we're all geographers and we're all explorers.
Yeah, we're all poets too.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. If someone chooses to, this is going to sound a bit strange maybe, if someone can't leave their house and all they experience for the whole of their life is their living room and watching the news, then they are the only person who would have been on that journey in that room and had that experience. That would have been their geography, and that would have been their exploration through their time on this planet. Now, they may not have put it in that framework, but I believe that to be true in terms of the human experience.
Got it.
The challenge then is, so for me, geography is about place and about making places better and enjoying places and understanding places and connecting places. And all of us do that actually in different ways. The most obvious thing is, when people are doing science, they'll often think, oh, well, I'm doing a science experiment, so I'm doing science, right? Or history, I'm visiting a castle, so I'm doing history. With geography, a lot of people have grown up with geography thinking that it's about just naming places on a map or something like that. But actually, geography is about making your house feel secure, making your children feel welcome in your house, your school. It's about going on holiday and thinking about where you're going to go and what experiences you want to have. It's about what you consume and how that has an impact on other people's ability to secure their children's quality of life elsewhere on the planet. So I think we are all actually doing geography and we're all exploring, but then there's a question about whether or not you've got a heightened state of awareness of how you're using those powers and those skills to make your life better or to have an impact on others in some way. And for me, that's what being more aware of that is more important. So I grew up my dad was in the army. I spent a lot of time in the United States when I was like really, really like young. And I think for me, that was really defining time, like catching snakes and like my parents getting nervous about me swimming in the creek in case I got bitten by like a snapping turtle or, various things like that. I think that sort of period for me was very defining. Maybe less because it was about the United States, but more about my parents allowing me to go feral and getting a taste for exploration by being allowed to roam out and play out in that kind of way. But it's probably more later and thinking when I went in to do my teaching qualifications that I became more aware of the framework that how to make sense of some of those things that I now want to make sure that children can secure in their lives as well.
Got it. This idea of geography as place, and it's really eye-opening. I wonder, this is going to be an interesting question for you, for anyone. It's going to be interesting for me to ask.
Is this like question 8 or is this like question
this
8,
is
9A?
This is 9A.
9A.
You struck something in me. What happens to the space, the place? Let's take Minneapolis, Minnesota. Let's take the block where George Floyd was killed by police officers. What about this space in the community, this geography? What can we do? What needs to happen? Is that place like that physical place? Is it poisoned? Is it ruined? Like, I don't even know what I'm asking, but I just need to hear. I need to know what your thoughts are on geography in that place.
Well, you're interchanging a couple of different geographical terms in ways that is interesting to pull apart.
Okay.
So there's a heavily critiqued, but there's a geographer called Yifid Twan who talked about the idea that place is security and space is freedom, that we sort of want one and want to long for the other.
Stop. Place is security and space is freedom.
Right.
Security and freedom.
Yeah.
Got it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Not necessarily we can pull that apart because it could be the opposite, it could be true as well.
Okay.
But the point is that in terms of the way the geographers see it, place is a location which has meaning attached to it. As soon as it has meaning, as soon as you have a relationship with that area, it becomes a place. And this place is a different place for all of us, right?
Right.
And then space is more something where connections take place. Sorry about that double use of the word place, but where connections happen. And it's more where you move through, where ideas and products and services and thoughts move through space, right? So that's an interesting way to break it down. So then in terms of geography, I think an interesting way to be thinking is about how we are all architects and how we are all place makers. So I can change the emotions in this room through my behaviors. And we can educate our young people to come home and simply, for example, show interest in their parents and ask them a question about their day, and it will change the nature of the emotional architecture of that home. So the words we pick, the way we behave towards each other, not only changes ourselves, but it changes the nature of places as well and how we feel about those places. It links back to the psychogeography I was talking about before.
Wow.
As well, of course. So in terms of some of the very challenging situations we face in the world at the moment, clearly that all becomes very difficult when people have contested and conflicting ideas about what a place is for or what they want to happen in a place, or if people have different ideas about what's happening there or what's happened in its past. But by hearing from each other more, why we might have those different perspectives, I think it's quite often key to finding ways forward.
All right,
that help at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's a challenging question. You know, it's more than we probably have time for here.
Yeah, I'm not going to dig right in as far deeply into that question you just asked because.
All right, so let me just piggyback on that and ask you this question. You traveled across the globe. This is question 4. And you've interacted with many different cultures and environments. In this time of Black Lives Matter, what positive lessons or what lessons did you learn about diversity in your travels? Anything you want to share with us? A few things.
Well, actually, there's a group based here in London called Flourishing Diversity, which is based out of the anthropology department at UCL. I think actually does have some links to this school as well. And what I take from that is, to answer your question, is just this general sentiment that I think is brilliant, which is this philosophy really that whenever we have diversity or more diversity, the better things are. Mm-hmm. Whether it's culture or food, whether it's the way that we farm, whether it's having different ideas in the room, different voices, the more diverse it is, the stronger it is, the stronger we are as well.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Well, for lots of different reasons, but it depends on the context. I mean, just take for the example ideas.
Okay.
So if you allow ideas to compete with one another and you don't squash down voices or ideas, and you make sure you have a diverse range of people expressing those ideas in different ways, then people begin to hear other solutions or other solutions may come forward. So you just take our political system at the moment, for example, where quite often we have quite binary parties fighting each other. And we all know there's some other parties that possibly have much better solutions. But that diversity isn't allowed to come forward in the debates. We don't hear those ideas and those solutions. And so there's a cost to us. There's a very real cost as a result. And the same point can be made if we're thinking about ecologically speaking. Best farming practices, think small, have a diverse range of things that you're growing. In terms of permaculture techniques, that means that, for example, you might have sacrificial plants that will allow other plants to thrive, or plants that will deter other animals naturally from being in that space. But when we have smaller farmers with smaller landscapes with more hedges in them and more things being grown, then what you see is there's also much greater abundance and diversity of wildlife as well. Now, I think you could take that as a metaphor and think about a boardroom or a community, and each of those plants and each of those things that could flourish in that situation being, like I say, voices or ideas or leadership. And when you only hear from a monoculture, a sterile monoculture that's often been the prevailing tired power, then, we're all weaker as a result.
Got it.
But, I think that there's some work that I would like to do more on that I think is quite complicated, and I'll share, but I don't know necessarily where I'll go with my thought on this, but is that there's something very challenging, I think, around the fact that many people in the West have lost or forgotten some of the indigenous wisdom that still remains in other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. I think there's a very big problem in thinking about how we can learn from that knowledge and that wisdom in terms of striking a balance of not appropriating that knowledge in a way that is harmful or diminishing of the cultures where that has come from. But it seems to me that there's some wisdom that we have forgotten that we could learn from by speaking to people who come from places which we might think are quite backward, but are actually, environmentally speaking, far further forward than we are. So a very simple North American one, which I've taken to heart, which I think is interesting for us here in London, is the notion of 5-generation wisdom, which you might be familiar with or people might be familiar with. You heard this idea before?
I haven't heard that name, so maybe tell me what it is.
So essentially the idea is that the decisions we make today will not harm, and if anything will benefit people who are alive 5 generations from now. Now, when you think about the way in which we currently organize ourselves, we're not really thinking much further forward often than a few months, let alone 5 generations ahead.
Right.
And that idea is about thinking about how we can be good ancestors for the future. And I was speaking to some designers the other day who are working on an innovation project to do with the London National Park City, which we may or may not touch on. And they were coming up with a design brief for other designers to do some innovative work around this idea of London as a national park city. And in that work, they were doing some research into the different parks we have in London. We're very lucky to have inherited all these incredible parks and trees and things. And they worked out the Victoria Park in East London was basically established. It's the first proper public park that was created for the health of people, was created 5 generations ago. Most of the big trees we have in London, the London Plains, were planted about 5 generations ago. So there's an interesting question from that wisdom that I've taken on, hopefully not in an inappropriate way, to ask, well, what am I, what are we doing now that leaves the world or a place in a way that's in a better way in 5 generations? And quite often, some of the changes we want to see, simple things we could do in the city in many ways, are generational changes. So the issue of how do we connect more children to nature? The issue of how do we stop people paving over their front gardens and instead tackle flooding and have more biodiversity, more and some more beauty by having greener gardens? That's an intergenerational problem. We're not going to fix that straight away. So I think we often have to be thinking at a large intergenerational scale. So I don't know what other things people might want to share, what other ideas people might have. But I think that both across indigenous cultures, but actually also middle-class Western cultures, there's a lot of wisdom like that that could be shared more, that we don't hear enough of because we're often siloed within our own part of society. So when we hear from people from different places and different experiences, then I think that's that kind of idea that can help bring our thinking on, help us find solutions.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying about us not being as connected in America. It's less of the familial and the community. It's gotten away from that. And I don't know if it's because we've forgotten it. We aren't taught it. We aren't reminded of it. It's not a part of our learning. It's not a part of our, I don't know.
I don't want to challenge you too much, but I think that...
Challenge me.
But I think that it's important to say some or many, because I know plenty of people in the US who are deeply connected to land and nature and to each other and all kinds of things from a wide range of backgrounds. But I equally agree that the majority of voters, in this country, in the United States, in Australia, around the world, are not demanding the things that we actually need to secure that better future for 5 generations from now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if my daughter, I'm sure she's watching, she's constantly telling me, don't say many. You don't know everybody. Don't say all. So I'm sure she would appreciate your challenging me on that. So a lot of what you talk about sounds very innovative to me. What's your platform here at ASL, at the American School in London? What are you doing?
Well, at the moment, I'm having lots of conversations and I'm listening to lots of teachers and students. I'm going to say that I was on a call the other day with the Sustainability Council, and I was so impressed. I mean, I'm on Zoom calls and in meetings with like very senior people dealing with environmental issues. And I'm not in no way saying this to be sort of like, sucky or anything. I was so impressed with their level of organization and conversation around like how to reframe their vision for the school around the intersectionality of people's relationship with culture and nature to drive forward the agenda that they wanted. I just took so much inspiration from the depth and breadth of and professionalism of their conversation, actually. But, got a few fun things on at the moment. I'm interested in fun things that provoke different thinking. So the English department in high school, you might quite like this. We're looking at asking high school students, maybe other students in the future, to come up with 100 words to talk about through poetry or through prose an endangered animal that's on the IUCN Red List of Endangered Animals in what will be a podcast series called The Last of Their Kind Project. Got this project around, earlier on, Robin was talking about Butterfly Project. Butterfly Project as concept, but this school is on a beeline and created by Bugs Life, which is a UK charity. There are these corridors trying to be created around the country to create corridors for pollinators to be able to move more fluidly through the country. Lots of benefits to that. So I'm speaking with a number of different people around taking a lot of the different campaigns around the school, around ecology, environment, and tackling these problems to really focus on becoming a bee-friendly school and a bee-friendly neighborhood. That's not just about bees, that's about what you plant for the bees. It's about the birds that have a relationship with the bees. It's about our cultural relationship through art and practice. So thinking about what it means to not to be a bee-friendly school, but how can we have an impact as we are on this beeline with neighboring places as well. And then, yeah, I've got other ideas sort of stirring around as well, lots of ideas, which is really exciting. But one of the most rewarding things for me has been having lots of conversations with lots of teachers in different places and just planting seeds and starting to draw connections with some businesses and organizations in the city that I think that by young people having a direct relationship with planners or property developers in the city, they can begin to understand how they are innovating, and when they're doing their projects, have real life people that they can sort of show their work to, so that audience is meaningful.
This is so enlightening. So before we go to questions from our Zoom audience, do we have any questions from the audience? Hold on, we got a lot of people at one time. A lot
of hands.
Is there anyone? We're good. One person? No? You have something?
Craziest place that I've walked through was the question. Craziest walk I've done, I was doing a project in Sao Tome, which is a small island country in the Gulf of Guinea, just off the west coast of West Africa. And I was actually doing a project to explore this issue of the resource curse. So on this island, they thought they were going to come into lots of money around oil. And there's this counterintuitive curse that often happens where countries that discover oil actually become poorer and conflict breaks out. So I wanted to explore that issue, particularly within the different cultures that exist on the island. And during that trip, I thought it'd be fun to climb a volcano. And it turns out that was a really bad idea, because the higher up I went, the more dangerous it became. And the further down I would have gone, it would have been really dodgy without ropes. And I was with a guide, and it wasn't like a live volcano, it was a dormant volcano, but it became increasingly sharp-edged and challenging. But luckily, when we got to the top, the other side was a very easy walk down. But I think that was the most memorable walk I've been on. I wouldn't do it again. Yeah.
Anne Fossey, my 12th grade daughter is taking ecology as well as human geography.
Awesome.
She's wondering if you might do any special projects with those classes. And she says, by the way, she went on a geography camping trip with you and other guerrilla geography educators 8 years ago to the Peak District. Nice to see you again.
Oh my gosh, I thought I recognized that name. That's crazy stuff. That was a fun camp.
Was it?
We were doing like contact improvisation dance to experience geography on that camp, and making maps and doing all kinds of fun stuff.
Did you say dance?
Dance, yeah.
You dance?
And hide and seek.
You can dance?
We can all dance.
I love it.
We can all dance.
We can all do it.
We can all dance. We can all dance. All right. It'd be fantastic to think about a project to do that combines those subjects and make some moves.
Very good.
I meant to say make some change, but I was thinking about the dancing, so it turns out to be moves, right?
What does, this is from Jonathan Putnam, what does DRE, I'm assuming, think of the failed garden bridge across the Thames project?
Oh, that's a great question, isn't it? DRE, Daniel Raven Ellison.
Oh.
There you go.
I'm a little slow tonight.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's been a long day.
Great question. So, basically, I think it was a really bad idea for all kinds of reasons.
Well, tell us what happened.
Well, the Garden Bridge was an elaborate project to spend, I think, something like £200 million, maybe far more than that, on building a private bridge through private funds, but publicly accessible, across from South Bank over to Temple, which is actually the geographic centre of London on the other side of the river. And the idea was to have this bridge that was full of soil, and then you could plant it up beautifully with plants, which actually responded to the heritage of that area. And it had a number of very well-known architect firms and designers and actresses and various people behind it championing it. And I think it was a really bad idea for a number of reasons. First, if you want to have a bridge in London, that's not where you put a bridge. You could have 10 bridges in East London for the same price and connect up much poorer communities that actually need bridges, for starters. Or, you could have a cheaper bridge down at Kew Gardens across to Brentford, which is quite a poor community, and again, connect up that part of the city where there's problems because you'd have to walk very long distances to get to the next bridge. So having a bridge at South Bank when there's already lots of bridges there already is like not a great idea. The biggest thing, though, I think is around, there's all kinds of issues around the ethics of how the development took place, which we're not going to go into here. But I think there's a question about if you're going to spend £200 million on an environmental project or an architectural project, is that the right project for the city? If I had £200 million to spend on a garden project, then I would disperse that across the 654 wards in London, and we would have a diversity of ideas and flourishing and examples of good practice around what could be done in different public gardens and public spaces and streets across the city. Going back to that diversity point, whereas that was about a small number of people making that particular investment, which I think was problematic for that particular location. But I think what's sad about it is twofold. One is, for me, a question within like the environment community about how can that project raise so much money, and yet other much greater needs in the city go without raising that kind of money? And what can we learn from the storytelling and the championing of that project that other people can learn from to get similar money in for other projects? But to go a bit deeper, the thing that I feel sad about that particular project about is that we have lots of world-class architects and designers here in this city, and they often do their most beautiful, best work elsewhere in the world. So biophilic design, which is about having a love for nature and being inspired by nature and doing things for nature. There's a lot of architects who are brilliant at that work in this country, but you see the fruits of the labor in places like Singapore and China, where there's courage around architecture that results in some really amazing things appearing in the landscape in those cities, like those incredible trees in Singapore, for example. I think that projects like the Garden Bridge being talked down and bold architectural projects being slammed means that we don't have as much architectural diversity in the city as I would like, in terms of really good biophilic design on buildings and things. So I think the fact that the Garden Bridge fell probably put the brakes on other kinds of projects happening in the future, even though that wasn't the right project for that place.
Gotcha.
That's a long answer to that question.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer. What's a word you love, Daniel?
What I love, biscuit.
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 Biscuit. It's a great word,
No
isn't it?
animal
Someone else said that,
products.
biscuit. You can make biscuits without animal
I
products.
know.
It's very easy.
That's
yeah.
why I said it.
Yeah.
What's a sound you love?
So the first thing that came to my mind was a cow mooing, like a really deep, like, really deep moo.
Right.
I think it's quite pleasurable, isn't it? I like lots of sounds though. I don't know why they came. I think we went there because we were talking about biscuits, and I was thinking about cows.
Yeah, there's
a neurological pathway was opened up to cows.
I got it.
I prefer whales, I think, probably on the whole. Parakeets are great though in the city, don't you think? Like, I love how offensive they are. Just they're so raucous, rioting in the trees. It's like shouting at each other the whole time.
Right.
That's such a great part of the city.
Piece of really good advice you received recently.
You said it earlier, be kind.
One place, Kwame, you gotta walk here. Next week, Monday, I'm gonna go walking somewhere. Where do I need to go, Daniel?
just plot a line on a map straight north from wherever you live, don't know where you live, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers if you can handle it. I know you can handle 10, 15, and just walk there to see what happens.
This has been great. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
I've enjoyed talking with you too.
You are definitely an innovator, and I'm glad I don't have to follow you.
I don't know about that. We got 3 questions done. I'm really curious to know what the other 7 were. But
you obviously weren't paying
time.
attention. It was 11 questions.
Was there 11 questions?
Thank you all so much. I want to thank Joanne and Wendy and Robin and Jen and Joe and Mark, and thank all of you for watching and for being a part of this innovative conversations. Daniel, great. Have a great year. I'm here to support you.
Thank you.
And be inspired by you. And, you know, have a great year.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome.
Take care, everyone.